Hello, good morning everyone. This is Chetan Jain, and today I'll be presenting about performance management in Smartoffice. So let me share you the screen and we'll get started on this. So basically, what's performance management? Performance management is all about evaluating an employee's performance on the past records, and they when we are evaluating any employee's performance, there are certain criteria that we set properly, and then there are certain weightages, rating scales given, importance assigned to various parameters, also known as competency, and there are sub parameters that are again defined, and then certain questions are posed in order to achieve the required results. So, with the short understanding of performance management, I'll go ahead and explain you how this can be done in our software. So basically, you will have to go and set your various parameters, also known as competencies, and then you can define sub parameters, which we also call as sections. You can define the rating scale, which is shown here, and then the structure, how who will be rating, how early the reminder should go, how till when competency rating. We already have certain competencies already defined. You can always add any competency from here, and basically it's a simple, very simple option, as in you name the competency, and then once the competency is named and created, then you would assign a rating scale. It does not mean that this competency is related to this rating scale, but then these are the various masters you would create to to have a proper working model of a performance management. Now, why do we have various rating scales? Uh, um, any competency, it is not necessary that it's straightforward question to be answered. Certain times you need a detailed understanding. So the higher the probability of having various ratings, a detailed rating, so higher is the requirement for a rating scale. So if we see this option, there's a 5-point rating scale, so which means that point you can it will be rated in terms of 5 points, and then you can always define what does point 1, point 2, point 3, and point 4 and point 5 rating mean. So it can be lower to higher, or it can be higher to lower, as in how you require it and how is you have been working on. So you can rate, you can create the rating scale, and you can define what point 1 means and what point 5 means. So once you have defined that, we can always have a complete matrix defined in terms of uh, what is that you're expecting in terms of a rating that has to be achieved by one particular employee if he has to be treated at a particular level. And then you can also define in our software what would be the increment percentage if an employee achieves a particular target. So if you see in this matrix, you can have a target number of employees. This specific target number of employees is from the is from the point of view that when you have around 100, 200, 500 employees, there is something called as bell graph that we generate. So the system will tell you uh, uh, whether your company is really aligned in terms of a bell graph. Bell graph is a graph which shows that if you're getting a perfect bell graph, which means you have the right number of candidates who are at the perfect score. You have a good number of employees who are just below the excellent curve, who have people who are above the expected score, and then you have people who are at the bottom and the to a higher side. So if you see this curve, so you will understand that the starting point is a very small section, and the end is also a very small shape. But the mean or the mode where the majority of the people lie is the bell shape, which is the bottom, the top part of the bell shape. So this is what you will have at the target level. So you can have target employees. You can define what would be the minimum score that would be expected from an employee, and the maximum score if an employee has to be rated at a particular level. Currently in this particular matrix, what I have done is I have rated a particular employee at 1 if he has scored between 0 and 5, so he would be getting an increment of 5%. Similarly, you can have your own minimum and a maximum scores with a different rating and a different increment percentages. So this is how you would define. You would define the year, you would define the starting begin date and the end date for what particular period you are rating an employee. What is the minimum score to be achieved, maximum score if a particular rating has to be assigned, and what would be the increment percentage if an employee achieves that particular rating. And then again, from the perspective of bell graph, you would have a target number of employees for that particular bell graph, for that particular rating. So accordingly, you will see the bell graph generated. Now, as I said, you first need to define the parameters, then you need to define what rating scales you will have. You need to define target rating, or the levels or the matrix, how a particular rating has to be understood based on what score the employee has achieved. So once this is defined, we will go to how the review structure would look like. So when I say review structure, it basically answers two questions. One is how frequently you want, or for what period you are planning to review the particular set of employees, and who would review them. So we have given the option of employee reviewing himself, the manager reviewing himself, sorry, the manager reviewing the employee, and the secondary manager also reviewing the particular employee. Now currently this is a style of review wherein only the self and the higher authorities are included, but we are planning to include more levels, that is peer-to-peer level rating, and then subordinate ratings also. So we would like to come up with a 360-degree rating performance management option, but that is as part of our future plans. But we will surely be looking at something called as 360-degree rating option also in the future. So here we would, in the structure, we would create for what period we are rating and who all will be part of the reviewing team. Once this is done, we would set the reminders, as in when do the employee needs to be reminded about the particular due date, and how till what date the reminders will keep going for the employee as well as to the managers to give their submissions. Now there's one option which we have given in the system is assign goal by manager. Now, what does that mean is, if we go by various companies, there are certain companies wherein the manager would assign the goals, or the competency parameters, the sub parameters, and and the questions. Since he's the one who understands, who needs to evaluate that particular, he who understands what is the proficiency level, and how that employee needs to be evaluated, and he's the one who sees the work of that particular employee day in day out, so he's the one who is the best person who can assign the right goals to that particular employee. So we have given that option wherein the employee can assign the goal to the employee. If you check this, the permissions will go to the manager. Whereas if you don't check this option, the permissions will lie with the admin. So now let's go and understand how you can create a particular performance form or a review form, and then what are the additional options that can be configured when you're defining this. So if you see if you see any particular review form, there's a name attached to it for the identification purpose, and then there's a structure attached to it, as in who would be rating it and what is the period for which you're rating them. Then when does this review period start? When does this review period end? When is that the employee has to set his goal? So this particular field which says goal settings begin date defines when does the employee have to define his goals, and by when he needs to end defining his goals, for which particular year these goals will be defined for, when does the self-assessment start, when does the self-assessment end, and when does the manager needs to start his assessment, and when does the manager needs to end his assessment. Now, one thing to observe here is the goal setting begin and the end date, or if I have to be precise, the end date of goal setting will never overlap with the assessment date, since something that is not set cannot be evaluated. So the end date will never be after the self-assessment date. So and then the self-assessment day end date for an employee will always be before the start date of a manager. So these things will never overlap, and that is how I have defined here. But if you see the end date is after the start date, since I wanted to show you this particular form and make it available accordingly. So, but there should always be a gap between, should not ever overlap the assessment dates for employee and the manager. Now, there is something called as default rating scale. If you do not want to repeatedly assign a rating scale, you can assign a default rating scale. Now, there is something called as what we discussed is who can review an employee. Now there is something we define here is that whose review will get counted when the performance is actually calculated in the system. So we have given here three options, exactly the same options as the who can review. The same options are given here as in whose review will be getting considered. So if you say consider employee rating in final total, if you check that his review will get counted in the average calculation. If not, then his review will not get counted. Similarly, the same options are given for primary manager and the secondary manager. The whole intention is to have some flexibility, as in who really gives the inputs when the review is being collected. Now, if you see here, this particular form says review form questions. This is enabled in admin login only because we have not checked the option assign goals per manager. If we enable that option, this particular form tab will not be visible in the admin login. So let me show you some form that I have included questions for. Okay, so if you see here, there are questions which have been defined, and there are sections, subsections, weightages which have already been defined. Competency and sections have been defined with weightage assigned to each question. So what does that mean actually? When you're asking any questions, you assign the it is a direct question which will give you some information, and that information relates to a particular parameter. Uh, in the reverse way, parameters will define what questions you will define. So here is the competency which you can assign to that particular question, and then the sub parameter or the section. Uh, so, and then if the question that you're asking is really important from the review perspective, you can increase the weightage of particular that question. And if you have certain questions which are normal questions which do not have so much of importance, you can give them lower weightage, and the questions with higher importance can be given higher weightage. So that is how the system will also calculate the weightage of that particular weightage of that particular question. So this is how you can assign weightage, you can assign the competency, you can assign the questions to each particular form that you're defining for the review purpose. You can define multiple questions, you can define multiple review forms, and the same can be defined in the manager login also. So now that we have seen how a form is defined in terms of when what is the period it relates to, when the goal settings have to be defined, when the self-assessment has to be given, when the manager has to give his assessment, and whose evaluation gets counted when the final numbers are calculated. So all these options are given here, and then the questions can be assigned, the competency can be assigned here in the next tab, and the weightages and section can also be assigned here. So this is about how what masters or what flexibility is given in terms of how a performance rating form can be defined with various flexibility in terms of what can be done in those particular forms. Now you can directly assign a particular form to a particular employee right from here, or here, wherein you select that particular review form and select the employee and allot it to that particular employee. Or you can always go to the employee login and allot various review forms and questions to that particular employee. So once it is allotted, this is how you will see the various forms that have been allotted to the particular employee. And you will see a bar graph. When you say click view details, you will see the bar graph and the answers which have been given by the employee as well as the manager. So so you can see the bar graph, you can see the self rating, the manager rating, and the average rating of that particular review form, and with the details also. So this is how you can see the details, and then you can then what you can say is what is the result once the entire results, I mean the reviews are submitted, forms are submitted, what is the final result of this particular review. So here you can see the employee code, the employee name, participant type, whether it's a self, is it the manager, is it the secondary manager, and what is the average rating. And then you can see the performance part. Let me show you one which has numbers in it. So here we have numbers. So the performance part, the total competency rating, and then the rating code. So this is how the system will understand, since it is above 5 and below 10. So the rating code is given as 2, and the increment percentage that the system has picked based on what we have defined is 10% rating will be can be given to this particular employee. Now you can export this and import it into the increment module, or the increment module in the payroll section, or in the future we would also be linking it directly with the payroll module, and give here option wherein you can directly process the increment from this particular HRMS module itself. So this is how it will appear in terms of an admin login. Now let me go to the employee self-service, where you can see how an employee can see what are the forms that are available, how the questions will appear, what kind of details he can fulfill, and then how the same thing will appear in a manager's login. So if you see here, the very first option says employee performance, and if I select the relevant month, the particular form appears, and then I can give the rate my responses here. So if I come here, I have not given any responses so far, so I can give any kind of response for that, but I can give this specific response to that particular question. So let me say just okay, and then give a rating here. So once I give such responses to all the questions, I will have a save option, and then that particular form will get saved. Let me go to a particular login where this all options are visible. So let me go to the by performance window. So if I go here, you can see that uh, the answer is given to this particular question, and they have given a rating also in terms of best. I can give another constant. Please give me a unique list of top 5 dealers A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and then I can whom I can talk to for cloud or other product promotion. And I can give a rating in terms of how well I'm connected to these channel partners, and then I can give and then I can use this option save self rating to save whatever response I have given. Now, if you can see, I have given answers to only two questions and have left three blanks. So you can always come back and give the rest of the answers, and the same thing will be visible in your login. Now, this is how an employee can give his particular responses. Now let me go to the manager's login where I will show you how a manager can not only give a response but also assign the goals, as we discussed in the very at the earlier part of our explanation. This is how a manager employee performance set employee goal. So here, if you see this particular window, currently we have an option only to assign goals to for one particular form. In the future, we will have option of assigning goals from the manager login for the multiple forms also. So we will give here a particular option wherein you can select that particular form and then select the relevant employee here. You can select multiple employees also. Like if you see here in this particular form, which is there in the admin login, there are competencies, weightages, and sections available. The same thing is what you can define here in terms of title. The questions can be defined here, the weightages can be assigned here, and the competencies can be selected here. In the future, we would be directly mapping the section like here in this particular field also, so that the manager also can directly select whatever the masters have been created. Currently, we are leaving up to the manager to define the sub parameters, but in future we are planning to do it as a selection option so that there's no multiple unnecessary sections created. Now, if this is how a manager can create a goals for the employee, and then this particular window will give an option to define it, and this particular window will let us see what are the questions or how the manager has assigned what particular goals or for the employee under what particular parameters. So if you see here, various questions have been assigned for this particular period of April 2020 to 31st March 2021, and the weightages are also visible 441. One thing I missed at telling when I was telling you about the form questions is, since everything whatever we do is in terms of calculation, so we are going by a division of 10x, that the total weightages should always end up being 10x. So this is what has to be kept in mind. So when you see any kind of review forms assigned, you will see that the total of the review form is always the weightages is always 10. The total will always end up being 10. So this is what has to be kept in mind. So here I have shown that the employee, how a manager can set the goal and view the goal set by manager. Now, how can a manager uh, give a response in terms of um, the employee's performance? Now, this is the window where, let me show you once again. This is the window where the manager can respond or give his evaluation for any particular employee. Currently, I've assigned only for one employee, so you are seeing only one. If we assign multiple employees, probably you will, I mean, you will surely see more employees. Yeah, this is how you will see multiple employees. Here you can see Payal Jain, here you can see Mamta. This is a form for 2020. This is form for 21. So this is how you will see all the forms that the manager has to respond to, and this is how you can go to that particular form, and he can give his submission in terms of what questions are available and what responses he would like to give against that particular employee. Yes, he does resolve. I'm just putting one response so that we can see how it gets saved. And at the end, if this form is has the timing to get saved, we will see an option as in save. Since the time has passed, so we do not see the option save. But if any of the form that has timing left for giving a response, we will see it here. So let me show that option here. So in the manager login, you will see that this is how a manager can save his ratings. If He's doing it within the due timing. I'll just say response is good, and I'll say this the work of this particular employee is good, and I'll say this particular rating. So when I come back and see the entire result here, this particular view will be visible here in terms of what has been evaluated for that particular employee in the admin login. 21. So, any response that has been received will show up here like this. And as I showed last time, this is how any particular responses will get saved, and you will be able to see the graph as I showed here in this particular login, in this particular window. FY 2020. So, so let me show you one of the manager's login where the review has been completed and the way it will appear to any particular manager's login. Um, So this is how there will be a similar view of this particular window as I have shown you here in this particular login. That the view will be like this. Sorry, let me go to the right window. Jaideep Sharma. So this is how it will appear in the manager's login also. He will be able to see the answers of employee and the managers, but he will not be able to alter the responses. And this is how the graph will also appear. This is how it will be visible and in the employee manager's login as well. So this is all about it. And if you have any questions, request you to raise the same. Meanwhile, I'll be just checking quickly as in if I have missed anything. There's something called as bell graph, which I'm about to show you. But before that, if you have any questions, please raise the same. So we've answered all the questions, and let us move to the bell graph option. So let me generate the bell graph. Um, So one thing about the bell graph is something that will generate accurately if the count of the employee is in good numbers. Since as we set the higher number of targets for the various employees, more the employee count and more the achieved count, you will get a better graph. If we had good amount of data, we would have seen a chart in terms of a bell graph like this. But currently, you're seeing two lines. This is only because we do not have sufficient data in the system. But if we had 50 or 100 employees, we would have seen a graph in terms of a bell, which would compare the target employee count and the achieved count again, and it will show the achieved percentages against whatever the targets were set. right? So this is how this is where you will see a bar bell graph, and this is where you can generate the Excel also from for your verification, as in or submissions. This is how let me show you the export reports. So this is how you will see the details, as in the headers will have these kind of names, and the evaluation would show who is the employee, what is the rating that he has given to himself, what is the primary manager's rating. If there was if there was a secondary manager rating, we would have seen that here. And then the average rating is calculated based on that, what is his rating code, and based on that, what is his increment number. So this is all about performance rating. Uh, Thank you so much. One thing I would like to mention here is that all our HRMS features will have the relevant windows available in the mobile app, but performance is one of the features which is not feasible to do it on the mobile app because of the kind of forms that are required to be filled and the kind of data that requires to be submitted is different, and so the mobile application will not have this particular thing. Okay, thank you for joining. Uh, uh, thank you.